Hello and good evening to all of our viewers tuned in. Tonight I am joined with the Brooklyn Center Police Chief Garett Flesland and Director of Community Prevention, Health and Safety, Latoya Turk. So thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's starting to get warm outside, so glad we're here tonight.
At least for a few days.
Yes, at least. So kind of to start off, our state has gone through an extreme tragedy recently with the ICE and Metro Operation Surge. How is the city of Brooklyn Center coping? I mean, there's been many different words out in the media that, agents have left or they're reducing agents. What does it look like right now in the city of Brooklyn Center?
Paper, rock, scissors for it?
So it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing event. It's impacted us significantly, like it has virtually every community across Minnesota from my understanding. There is a lot of fear and confusion, anxiety, a lot of questions. I think we in the city of Brooklyn Center are much like most communities. We're still trying to sort through information, trying to separate fact from fiction, trying to really understand what went on, what's going on. You kind of talk about a healing process. We're just starting that road to, I guess, recovery. It's going to be a while before we totally grasp, I think, the total impact that there was, and more importantly, how to move forward from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. As we all know, Brooklyn Center is one of the most diverse cities in the state, and so we kind of knew out the gate that we would potentially have enforcement in our city. And so I will say that we did a great job over the past 3 years really rebuilding relationships with community and our law enforcement. So it was very easy to pull our community partners together and start having those conversations around developing mutual aid, and just really getting the word out around resources that were available to our community. So from having community crisis response teams meetings to supporting our schools with mutual aid, I think we've done a pretty good job as a city.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned that community relationships, because it feels like, during this time, previously before this Metro operation, I heard a lot of people saying that, people were not a fan of law enforcement, but now it's like when someone sees an officer, they felt much safer compared to an agent. How did that bringing closer relationships with community members did you see a difference during this time of people like leaning towards law enforcement more or leaning towards the community more during this time?
I think like Director Turk was talking about, the last 5 years, 6 years, we have really been focused on rebuilding trust, rebuilding the relationships, both the current ongoing relationships as well as developing new ones. And so during the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've really leaned into that communication, that dialogue, trying to come up with what the expectations are. Let's all be at the table together, figure out what community's expectations are, how we as a city can meet them, and have that dialogue. Mm-hmm. So when, in this case, Operation Metro Surge came in, there were a lot of questions, and we were able to leverage those relationships, that trust that we had started to build with community, and come together and share information and try and debunk false information. So I think we were able to build upon the relationships that we were maintaining and creating, and that's what we were able to use to really help get through, the last 4, 6, 8 weeks together.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that, with federal agents, that is at a federal level compared to law enforcement, like police, ICE is a bit higher. Just curious, how many service calls did Brooklyn Center Police Department have that were related to ICE matters?
Good question. I don't have those exact numbers. I can give you some ballpark numbers though. We as a city, the police department, we respond to roughly 35,000 calls a year. When we look back and we started to crunch some of the numbers on the immigration enforcement related ones or the ICE related ones, we really started to see them first part of December, and we're crunching those numbers right now. Trying to break them down by week. 4 or 5 of those weeks since December 1st, we saw 2 ICE-related calls a week. A couple of the weeks we had 10, 12. I think the highest was 16 or 18 calls per week. So in the big scheme of things, out of 35,000 calls, it wasn't a lot. But any one call can be significant to the people that are involved in that call. And when we looked at the ICE-related calls over the last 6-8 weeks, most of them were initiated by community members calling 911 looking for information. They were looking for, they have a loved one they haven't seen for a couple of days. Can we figure out if they were picked up by ICE? Or questions about what we can do, what we can't do, just general searching for information. And that's where I think we did an okay job of leaning into those relationships and those groups and those community groups. Director Turk and I met with some of the community groups that we had relationships with to share information as best we could. And as important as sharing what we know is also sharing what we don't know as we try and sort through this information, figure out fact from fiction.
For sure. Another question I have too is, like during, especially the peak of it back in January after the death of Renee Good, did you feel like there was maybe a slight pause in crime at all? Like, was crime maybe lower? It just seems based on the media that there wasn't as much crime being reported or anything. So just curious in the city, did you?
It'll be interesting, and sometimes it takes a while for the numbers to flush out and for them to really become more established. And we're still trying to wrap up our crime numbers from 2025, even though we're almost 2 months into 26, because it takes a while to sort through them all. If there is a dip, my concern is some of it is because community wasn't calling us as much. There was confusion, there was fear, there were questions about, does local law enforcement, do local police interact and share information readily with federal immigration efforts, which the answer is no, we don't. But there was a lot of fear and concern. And so I think if there is a dip in crime numbers, I will wonder, and it'll take a while for us to figure out, is it just because they weren't reported, because 911 calls went down? That's going to be a really good question as time goes by and we're able to crunch the numbers a little bit more. Yeah,
for sure. Now I have a question for you, Director Turk. So roughly a year ago, Brooklyn Center was starting to expand 911 mental health calls. How have you seen, how does that look like now a year later? What does that kind of look like now, with Operation Metro Surge and just in general? I mean, mental health is just something that's always been there. So what does that look like now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started this, the conversation started much sooner than a year ago. It was probably in the works about 10 years that we had started talking about expanding the resources for addressing mental health calls for service. And so we're in year 2. And so we have 2 teams that are deployed, one during the day, one during the evening and on weekends, who respond to 911 calls for service. I will say it has been a tremendous asset to our law enforcement officers who are now able to hand those calls off and be able to actually go out and do police, more police-related calls versus dealing with some of the social service calls. And so having the Hennepin County as one of our contractors has provided much fruit for us because they have access to additional resources that a lot of our residents who are experiencing those crises need access to. Also having a team on the evening and the weekends, which is when we see a spike in our calls for service, also has been an asset. So it's really difficult to have a safe city without a healthy city. And so this is one of the programs that we have that help ensure that our city is not only safe, but also healthy.
And so with these mental health calls, do they also supplement to like domestic violence calls, or is it just solely like mental?
Yep. So there's a triage of calls that are taken by the team, or the expanded response team. Those calls are delegated from 911 dispatch. And so a domestic violence call would probably escalate to needing an officer to respond because there is, depending on what the caller says, the 911 dispatch will make the determination whether or not that's a call appropriate for the expanded response team or appropriate for an officer to respond to. But there's follow-up. If it is a domestic violence call, we have an entire team and investigators that handle our domestic violence calls.
Yeah. Another question is, so the Crime Prevention Board, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our crime prevention board is seated with our crime prevention specialists in our police department. So I'll hand that over to Chief to answer about our crime prevention board.
Sure, it's a long-standing group. Originally, the genesis of it was to have reward money available should we need to offer rewards to help solicit information to solve crimes. And over time, it wasn't used nearly as much as I think originally it was thought it was going to be used. So they have kind of expanded some of their interests, some of their outreach. One of the big feathers in their cap a few years ago was they were able to work with a bunch of community partners and businesses and gather enough money to help support the first camera trailer that the city was able to purchase. So the city put in for about half of it, and this collection of businesses and community groups funded the other half of it, which was a huge step forward, I think, in our ability to respond in new and unique ways. Camera trailers can be extremely powerful. They can be a huge deterrent. They can also help us collect evidence as we solve crimes. But they're also a sounding board for us in the police department to throw ideas at, to solicit feedback from the community, what concerns are, what fears are, what desires are. No one person, no one department can solve public safety. It is a team sport. It takes all the departments within our city, and it takes a lot of ideas. And it takes a lot of people, more than just me and Latoya, more than just the police department. It takes community helping drive where we're going to go.
For sure. Shifting gears a little bit, there's been some concern or some question surrounding like flock safety cameras just around the metro areas, cities implementing flock safety cameras to, catch speeding and that type of thing. What does that look like in Brooklyn Center?
So we've had flock ALPR cameras for two and a half years. There's a lot of misinformation about it. Those cameras are license plate readers. So they are not tracking any kind of speed. They are not doing any kind of traffic enforcement. They are recognizing and identifying specific license plates that are traveling through the area. So we have been using grant funding for 10 cameras for 2.5 years or so. They are a huge crime-solving tool. We have solved multiple carjackings and crimes of violence by being able to identify which vehicle was involved. They also alert us on hit lists, stolen vehicles. Stolen vehicles, when the camera picks that up, it will identify and let us know. Or if there is a alert on a vehicle that the owner is wanted for some kind of crime of violence and there's a probable cause pickup and hold out on them, that will alert our officers. So we have recovered many stolen vehicles. Our auto theft rates, when we looked at in 2025, they were down right around 50%. So after we saw a significant spike, partly because of some manufacturers that had some vulnerabilities in their system with some of the Kias and the Hyundais, but flock, those ALPRs have helped reduce auto theft, and they have helped us solve a lot of crimes that we would probably not be able to solve without them. But that information is not shared with immigration officials. It's not shared with federal authorities. The cameras that we have in the city, we do have some agreements to share with some of the neighboring local communities as a huge force multiplier to solve crimes.
For sure. I know that was a big question of, if they're not checking speed, are these cameras also being turned over to federal immigration for their operations?
And I'd like to add with the ALPRs, and it's not new technology. We used to have ALPRs on all of our squad cars. This is 10 years ago. That was, the technology was not nearly as reliable. We had a lot of problems with it, with the maintenance of that. So we got rid of those, but we used to have those on all of our squad cars that would monitor license plates. And with the ALPR program, because we use that technology, we have to have it audited by an independent entity every 2 years. We report that to the state. The data is only retained for, I believe the state requires it 60 or 90 days as a maximum. Ours is only retained 30 days by policy. So yeah, there's a lot of safeguards built into the technology that we're obviously extremely compliant with, but we do see a lot of success from that information.
Very fascinating. So question now, moving into like citations and stuff, how many, I know that you may not have a rough number, but roughly how many citations have been given to people with tinted car windows or maybe no license plates?
I wouldn't even try and guess right now. I can pull some of those numbers for you later. We've really tried to shift our focus, and yes, we will stop vehicles that we believe has excessive tint or does not have or do not have license plates. A lot of those calls are in response to 911 calls, but we really have tried to shift our focus to driver behavior. Focus.
Like reckless driving.
Reckless driving. The goal is not to write a certain number of citations. We did some analysis many years ago, and it actually cost the city money when we issue citations, when you look at all the potential court costs and such. So it is not a money-making venture for us whatsoever. State law prohibits us from having any kind of quota system. So that's part of the reason I don't even know how many citations we've written. I know we are out there proactively making traffic stops, but they are primarily behavior-based focus because our goal is safe streets. It's public safety, and it is trying to get those behaviors addressed, and we want to change those behaviors. And sometimes it's by a stern lecture alongside the road, and sometimes it is through a citation. But there is some discretion involved, and I think there's a value in discretion at the best way that we can change behavior of a particular driver.
So now kind of bringing up about the traffic stop. A few months ago, when the Hennepin County attorney declared about traffic stops, that new protocol, how have you seen that implementation, I guess, work for the better or be a negative for the city? What do you see in that?
I guess so far, I'm not seeing any significant impact to the city. We have not changed the way that we police. We still need articulable suspicion or probable cause to take any kind of enforcement action. And I haven't seen an impact from it significantly.
Okay. I guess now looking forward to the summer, you know, there's been a lot of, I guess, heavy stuff going on so far. What are some upcoming things in the city of Brooklyn Center that people can get involved in or can look forward to that are coming up? I mean, spring is right around the corner.
Yeah, I'll start. Being that community engagement sits inside of the Department of Office of Community Prevention, Health, and Safety, engagement is key for us. Like Minnesota, we have a short window for engagement, especially outdoors. We have a beautiful park system, and so in the early spring, we'll be having some citywide cleanup, and so it's an opportunity for people to get together, fellowship, and keep the city clean. We are the start of the Mississippi River, which is one of the most polluted rivers in the country, and so we want to do our due diligence and be good stewards of that. We also will be hosting neighborhood meetings throughout the year, which you can find those dates on our city calendar. Those neighborhood meetings, all of the departments are represented. You get department-wide updates on what's going on. You get to meet the directors and the city leadership, and city council is there. We have a ton of cultural events that will be going on in our parks. We'll also be hosting department-wide open houses this summer. So departments will have open houses. We had some really successful ones last year with the police department and public works and fire, and so we're looking to continue to do that. So there are a ton of opportunities to connect with the city this summer, spring and summer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then are there any major updates going on to the city at all this summer, like any construction or anything like that?
There's always something.
There's always construction projects. the city website is the best source for reliable information. Those topics come up at city council meetings, staying engaged there. I think I'd like to add a little bit to Director Turk. What we're looking forward to this spring, summer, fall is getting out and communicating more. I think the key to a healthy community and a healthy relationship with city government is that dialogue, that ongoing interaction, those relationships. So we want to continue to build upon the relationships that we already have, as well as cultivate new relationships. We're really trying to get more and more involved with the youth. I think when I look over my 25 years as a cop, the youth voice was not always at the table. And when it wasn't always heard as clearly and as loudly as it should have been. So we are trying to identify new and unique ways that we can effectively interact with the community, especially the youth, to get those ideas into city government, to get those concerns, to get those fears, to get what excites them and what worries them. Because when we know what worries them, then we can start working as a city, as a community, to address those fears and to try and support the youth as best we can. So that's what I'm looking forward to is we're using more and more unique ways to engage. Social media. We are doing social media stuff now that 5 years ago we never did. I could see us starting to up our game on the gram or Instagram or whatever the way. Yeah. I think the gram is what I'm supposed to say nowadays. Maybe even some TikTok videos. I've got some very creative cops and professional staff that when we cut them loose on that kind of stuff, I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be engaging, and I think we as a community are going to benefit with that better dialogue, that better interaction, those more genuine and authentic relationships.
I love that, and I love also including the youths, because I think that's a piece that people tend to forget and communities tend to forget, because the youth are tomorrow. If youths do have ideas though that they'd like to send directly, is there a contact person that they could share those ideas with?
Yeah, I'll say that Brooklyn Center has one of the youngest populations as well. So that 18 to 35-year-old age group. So it's imperative that we tap in and we have them at the table. I would say just call either chief or myself, the city manager, our comms director, our communication director. Like, we're all available and open to have that dialogue.
Nice. Thank you for tuning into tonight's episode. We will see you again next month.